Are changes coming to the Republicans' bill to repeal and replace Obamacare? President Donald Trump, Vice President Mike Pence holding major discussions with GOP leadership this hour. We're on it. Yes, we are. But first, powerful storm clobbering the East Coast. Flight cancellations piling up, power outages piling up, forcing folks across the Northeast to begin digging out. Welcome, everyone. I'm Stuart Varney in for Neil Cavuto, and this is Your World, and we are all over it. With Brian Lanus in Framingham, Massachusetts, where they are still feeling the brunt of it. Janine Tornatore at Chicago's O'Hare on travelers stranded because of it. And meteorologist Rick Reichmuth on how long before we are done with it. We begin with Brian Lanus. Brian?
Hi, Stuart. Yeah, we are here in Framingham, Massachusetts. This is about 30 minutes west of Boston. As you can tell, the snow is letting up. It has turned to sleet here. The roads have been plowed, and that is because there have been some 3,000 emergency vehicles all throughout here in Massachusetts. The governor telling people to stay off the roads. It is dangerous out there. Unfortunately, we had the death of a 16-year-old girl in New Hampshire in a traffic accident this morning. But the big concern now also is power outages, especially along the coast of Massachusetts. We're talking about gusts of 50, 60, 70 mile an hour winds. Right now, some 45,000 people in Massachusetts alone are without power. But that number from Virginia up through New England is 215,000 customers at latest count. Also, flooding is a major concern, as you can tell from that video, along the coast. High tide was about 1:30. They're expecting moderate to light flooding here in Massachusetts. Snowfalls have been big. Over a foot in some places in Pennsylvania, like Bethlehem, up to 2 feet of snow in other places, like in western Massachusetts, Worcester, for instance, as well as, the Berkshires, western Massachusetts, expecting up to 2 feet of snow, over 24 inches. Now, some 6,700 flights have been canceled nationwide. The big concern now for tomorrow will be ice as the temperatures begin to fall. Boston schools, for instance, have been canceled because of those freezing temperatures and concerns of ice. Stuart?
All right, Brian, thanks very much indeed. Now, the storm, as he said, hitting airlines hard. Planes grounded as crews work to clear the runways and de-ice those planes. More than 8,000 flights canceled nationwide since Sunday. Airline stocks slammed today, United Continental taking the biggest hit. Janine Tornatore is with Orbitz.com. She's at Chicago's O'Hare right now. All right, Janine, how long before things get back to normal?
Well, it's going to take a few days. We had 1,900 flight cancellations yesterday, 6,400 today, and expecting around 400 to 500 more tomorrow. So it's going to take a few days. And if you don't have a ticket or a seat already on a flight for tomorrow, don't head to the airport. Those flights are all booked. If you're still looking to get a seat on a flight, it could be your Thursday or Friday before you get rebooked onto another flight to get to your destination. The good news is that when we see ripple effects in these types of situations, it can cause havoc on other regions of the country. But the good news here was that because there weren't very many aircraft from the Northeast in the sky today, we didn't see a lot of air traffic issues in other regions of the country.
Janine, one question. If my flight was cancelled, say yesterday, because it's a weather event, do I get my money back?
Well, for travelers in these situations, the airlines are very good about waiving their change and cancellation fees. So contact your airline, find out if your flight was affected. You should not have to pay a penalty for canceling that flight or changing it as you need to.
All right, that's the good news, Janine. We'll take that. Thank you very much indeed. Now, millions of people are still caught up in this storm, hit with everything from hail and freezing rain to 2 feet of snow. That's creating treacherous driving conditions. This time-lapse video showing just how quickly all of this snow accumulated. Obvious question, so when will it finally let up? Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth in the Fox Weather Center. When will it quit, Rick?
We have probably about another 16 hours or so before it's completely gone, exited across parts of New England. But take a look at this. A big winter so far. Damascus, Pennsylvania, 30 inches. That's over towards the Delaware Water Gap. A lot of snow there, and we still have a lot more snow to be had, especially across New England and some of the higher elevations in around parts of the Adirondacks, the White Mountains and the Green Mountains, maybe up to about another 18 inches or so of the snow. snow. Blizzard warnings still in effect all of coastal areas of Maine, throughout much of Massachusetts, parts of New Hampshire, Vermont, still parts of upstate New York, and parts of Pennsylvania. The winds are going to continue to be very, very strong as we move through the overnight hours tonight. And behind this storm, the really cold air kind of settles in. But take a look. That's 10 p.m. Most of Maine being socked in, although we'll start to see that warmer air move in right along the coast. And I think we'll see a little bit of rain on top of the snow, or at least probably some sleet on top of the snow that you had in places like Portland, Maine. But there you go, 6 a.m. and it is almost out of here. The cold air really settles in behind this. Take a look at this. Freeze warnings in effect all the way down towards the panhandle of Florida, throughout much of the deep south, heading towards the southeast. Frost advisories in effect across much of Florida as well. So that cold air is coming in. Take a look. Here's today's high temperatures. But tomorrow, all of that snow that's there, and especially along the coastal areas, it saw a lot of that slush, kind of that really thick 6 inches of icy sleet and slush that's there is going to freeze and not be able to melt at all very quickly. Only 27 in New York tomorrow, 29 in Philly, just getting to freezing in D.C. And these are the high temperatures. The overnight temperature is much lower. That warming up a little bit Thursday and again into Friday. But take a look at this. Tonight into tomorrow morning, Stuart, these temperatures here, 19 degrees down in parts of North Carolina, 28 in Atlanta, into the 30s, all the way down towards Florida. So the cold air is here for a few days.
Yeah, and it's mid-March. Thanks so much, Rick Reichmuth. We take that. Thank you. How about this? Look at this. Politico's headline heading into today's storm. Will Trump bungle first big snow threat like Obama? Bungle? Really? To Howard Kurtz, host of Media Buzz here on Fox. Bungle? Is that? I think that's called a pejorative headline, isn't it?
You could say that. Well, first of all, I couldn't start my car this morning, and I blame President Trump. And I hit past a lot of potholes on the way to work. I thought he was going to make America great again. Look, in this city, which if you could see the streets behind me, Stuart, has essentially been shut down by 4 inches of snow, this reflects two things. Every story ultimately has to be about Trump, and many of those stories have to portray Donald Trump as being on the brink of disaster.
Well, I want to bring something to your attention, Howard, something that appeared in the Washington Post. There was a headline about some vandalism that had occurred at President Trump's golf course. Now, initially, the headline read, I'm trying to look at it right now, it said it was a daring act of defiance. That was in the original headline. Now, then they changed it. Let me see what they changed it to. Let me see if I can get this right. It changed into an elaborate act of vandalism, and the editor put a note into the story saying the story was changed to more accurately reflect the nature of the actions. What is going on at the Washington Post?
Well, that is just a head-slapping blunder, frankly, and the idea that breaking the law and defacing Trump's property could be seen as a daring act of defiance by environmentalists just shows you what I like to call Trump trauma, which is if this had happened to property associated with Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, I can't imagine the paper would have published that kind of headline. But, getting back to the snow for just a second, it is true if you've got Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy that a president could be judged, as Politico says, by the performance of FEMA. But this is a typical major northeast snowstorm, and the idea that President Trump is going to be judged by it, he might bungle it, tells you something about the tone of media coverage these days.
Well, I want to go back to the Washington Post because I'm sorry, but I am astonished at the venom that they come up with constantly directed towards President Trump. Now, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, the co-founder of Amazon. And what we're looking at now is the aftermath of the golf course after that vandalism that occurred. I think that the Washington Post has destroyed its reputation as a major news, very viable outlet. What say you?
Well, I don't agree with that. I certainly will take issues with some of the stories in the Post, and I take major issue with this one. I led my column with it this morning because it is just so revolting to see that this act of breaking the law and vandalism and defacing private property, which happens to be owned by the current president of the United States golf course in California, could be described almost in glowing terms. Well, they really stuck it to him, a defining act of defiance, a daring act of defiance, just says something about the mindset in newsrooms. But I don't want to go global and say that the Post doesn't do some good reporting or that it's Jeff Bezos' fault, since it was a mistake probably made by some young reporter. reporter, and fortunately corrected with that editor's note.
Well, I just don't think that editorial should bleed over so much into the news arena. And I think that's what the Washington Post is doing.
Or snarkiness, which is what this was.
Yes, okay. We'll agree to differ, Howard. That's the way it is. Thanks very much, Howard Kurt. Good stuff.
Good to see you.
President Donald Trump and House Speaker Paul Ryan meeting this hour. Are changes to the repeal and replace plan coming? To Wall Street, the Dow closing down for the second straight session. The Nasdaq and the S&P 500 also on the downside today. Remember, please, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates. We shall see. You're about to look live at the White House, and how would you like to be a fly on the wall in the Oval Office right now? President Trump is on the phone with House Speaker Paul Ryan. Yeah, the clock's ticking on replacing Obamacare and cutting taxes. To Fox Business Network's Blake Berman, Blake, looks like the president is in negotiation mode, fully engaged. Is that right?
He is indeed, Stuart. In fact, he said that there will be a big, fat, beautiful negotiation the other day. That's the way he put it. Right now, he is on the phone not only with Paul Ryan, but also Kevin McCarthy, the number 1 and 2 over there, House Republicans. And as you know, there is this gap that exists currently within the Republican Party between House leadership, the Trump administration, and those conservative members of the House Freedom Caucus, trying to bring that group over to their side to get behind the American Health Care Act. On this phone call right now, we expect discussions to include the manager's amendments, essentially without getting into the nitty-gritty weeds here, that is allowing for changes after a bill goes through a committee, but before it gets to the floor, essentially tweaks that it would allow to potentially quell the concerns of some of those conservative Republicans as it relates to the AHCA. Also today, here at the White House, the press secretary, Sean Spicer, continued his pushback against the CBO score, the Congressional Budget Office. Especially, they're reading that some 14 million Americans would go uninsured next year should the plan go through. His big point today was that many of those are currently forced to buy the insurance that they have. Listen here to Spicer from earlier this afternoon.
You've got almost 20 million people in America who have said that they don't want Obamacare and they'll either pay a penalty or have applied for a hardship. Those are people who don't have it to begin with. The exchanges sought out to cover these people, and we're finding out that you've got 9 million plus who are getting it right now. They have no coverage.
The point here from Spicer, Stewart, is he says the CBO is good at projecting dollars, good at dealing with budgets, but not good, he says, at projecting the attitudes of people. Stewart?
All right, Blake Berman, thank you. Vice President Pence, he's getting in on the action. He's also at the White House meeting with key Republican lawmakers, working on possible changes to the health care bill. To the Washington Examiner's White House reporter, Sarah Westwood, looks to me, Sarah, like it's all hands on deck. Get some kind of unity about this Obamacare plan, right?
Exactly, because it is House conservatives that are the immediate hurdle to this bill getting passed into law. The Trump administration is negotiating hardest with these House conservatives. They're actually wielding a lot of power right now because the last thing Republicans want is to look disunified on the very first part of phase 1 of a 3-phase plan, which is what's happening right now. So what we're hearing, like Blake mentioned, is that the White House is working with congressional leadership to get this management amendment passed. It's a way for the leadership in the House to make sure that this isn't a free-for-all, that this isn't members adding all kinds of amendments, some getting voted up, some getting voted down, this becoming a circus of sorts. This is a way to ensure that there's an orderly behind-the-scenes process whereby the players will knock out what they want to change about the American Health Care Act. They'll add the amendment at the very last minute, right before it heads to the floor, and then it can pass cleanly onto the Senate without a whole lot of debate that's playing out on C-SPAN.
Who's giving away here? Who's giving way, I should say? Is it the conservatives or is it the Ryan people? Who's giving ground? Any idea?
Well, in a sense, everyone will have to give a little bit of ground, right? Because Speaker Ryan, if he had his druthers, would pass this bill on intact, exactly as written. He's tried to frame it as a binary choice. Either you vote for it or you're basically in favor of leaving Obamacare in place. Conservatives will get some of what they want. They want to move up the date that the Medicaid expansion phases out, for example. They'll get some of these changes in the management amendment. But at the end of the day, they'll still be voting for a bill that doesn't go far enough in repealing Obamacare. And so in that sense, they're giving up something too, even though the negotiations are tilted in their favor because what's being added to the bill is what conservatives want at this point.
But they've got to get together. Unity is vital at this point for the Republican Party. Got it. Sarah Westwood, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
New report. It shows business leaders are betting on tax reform. If it doesn't happen, are all bets off? We debate, and you will decide. Some of the most prominent CEOs are expecting big things from Washington. According to a new survey, CEO optimism is surging, with business leaders banking on a major tax reform package. President Trump jumping on the survey. Here's the tweet. Great optimism in America, and the results will be even better. But if the tax cuts don't come soon, will those good vibes turn bad? To Hadley Heath Manning of the Independent Women's Forum and Charlie Gasparino of the Fox Business Network. Charlie, to you first. This is a show-me economy, a show-me stock market. He's got to get this stuff done this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think we should back up and give him a little more credit on something else. I mean, President Obama was essentially at war with corporate America almost from the minute he walked in there. I mean, he attacked them as fat cats, beat them up every chance they got. When they used to do business meetings with CEOs, and he had a council of businessmen that he used to meet with every now and then. He used to arrive late, leave early, lecture. They used to call it the 3 L's. Arrive late, leave early, and lecture them, and didn't listen. 4 L's.
Of course, they actually called Trump.
And so Trump goes in there as a businessman. He actually does listen to him. So I think right off the bat you get points there. But yes, at some point, if this market if you need an economy that reflects Dow 21,000, which we don't have right now, the only way to get that is through some sort of fiscal stimulus, which he has to get to.
Get on with it. Got on with it. Okay. Right. Hadley, why is it that I don't read in the newspapers and I don't see on the nightly news all this good news about optimism from business and confidence on the part of consumers, or even the Wall Street rally? I never hear about it. Why not?
You'll have to ask some of the people who make those decisions about what to cover. But I agree with Charlie. Tax reform is going to be a big issue facing CEOs. But when you look into this survey, actually the top concern that they've cited for the past 5 years, this Business Roundtable CEO survey, is regulation. Regulation being the #1 cost pressure on businesses. And President Trump is already taking action to make some regulatory reforms, whether it's in the healthcare sector or the energy sector or in the Department of Labor. This is immediate relief. And I believe there's good reason for CEOs to be hopeful that relief from regulation is a very real result of President Trump's election.
Well, Hadley, do you think there's a new tone from the administration, a new tone in America? Do you think so?
I think so, especially in the business community, because regardless of what these CEOs might think of President Trump on a personal level or whether they agree with him on every policy issue, the major policy issues impacting business, whether it's tax reform, regulatory reform, infrastructure, training and equipment for the right workforce for the 21st century, these are things that people are very optimistic about. Healthcare reform, I'd put that on the list as well, because businesses under former President Obama's administration, not only were they feeling cut out because of the tone and examples like you didn't build that, but the policies of the Obama administration were really harmful and burdensome to business.
Listen, I don't want to make this a Trumpkin love fest, but I guess I'm going to have to agree with her. The one thing that CEOs like is a certain amount of certainty, right? One thing about Obama, you never knew where the next regulation shoe was going to drop, when the next tax increase was going to come, how much more Obamacare taxes you're going to have to pay, where else are businesses going to get screwed? That uncertainty is gone. I mean, I'm not saying Donald Trump as president will have to perform. He will have to get through some regulations, particularly on Dodd-Frank and banking, to loosen up the law so they can lend to small businesses. But think of it this way. They're thinking about what he's going to loosen up, not what he's going to screw them with. And I'll tell you, under Obama, they were getting screwed by the day.
All right, Hadley, Charlie, both of you, thank you very much for joining us, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Look who is calling the Republicans' health care bill a costly scam. None other than Obama architect Jonathan Gruber. Time to call out the hypocrisy. And Senator Bernie Sanders now saying thousands of people will die if the Republicans get their health care wish. Is that right? Is that fair? Reaction from a Democrat senator coming up for you. The publisher of Catalina magazine, Kathy Aru, agrees with him, and she's with me now on the opposite side of the fence here. How are you, Kathy?
Good, how are you?
You got to admit, it's a little bit rich, isn't it? When the man who says Americans are stupid for being scammed into voting for Obamacare now says that the Republican plan is a scam in itself. You got to be almost embarrassed by this.
Well, he doesn't have the best choice of words, let's say. Maybe I don't agree with him with his words, but I do think it is a scam. I mean, Trump did have that Obama moment, that Oprah moment where he said, healthcare for everybody.
Yes, but you can't be happy to see this guy out front for Democrats and for Obama.
I don't like what he's saying, but the CBO, you have to understand, I'm sure you understand, is nonpartisan, and as a matter of fact, if it is partisan, is a Republican that's running it.
Yes, and as he just said, as Jonathan Gruber said way back then, the CBO can get it wrong, and they did get it wrong. They scored Obamacare way back when as costing $1 trillion less than it actually did cost. They were out by $1 trillion.
But it does sound that millions of people will lose their health insurance. Premiums will go up. And the group of people that are not exactly ready to retire, AARP is saying this. They're not, and the AARP, we trust in them, I think. They're not fake news. They are saying that this is not good for the elderly. So if you're stuck within that 50 to 64 age range, this is trouble. Repealing Obamacare is trouble for that age range. And those are the Trump voters.
I want you to deal with the 14 million people whom the CBO says will be thrown off their insurance coverage in 2018.
Exactly.
What's happening here is that those 14 million people will actually have a choice. They're not being forced to get that. That is not the same. That is not the same as being thrown off your health insurance.
People are going
to have a choice whether you want it or not. That's a choice.
But what about Medicaid? We do know that people.
Well, what about the 14 million? Come on, that's what everybody's concentrating on.
And then the 24 million years from now.
Deal with the 14 million who are supposed to lose it next year.
We don't know what's going to happen. We
Precisely.
Don't have
So why does the CBO says that they're going to be thrown off? Why?
The CBO is a Republican-run agency. It's supposed to be nonpartisan.
You can't deflect like
so
that.
Perhaps that's what Gruber was referring to when he was with the Obama administration. Maybe he had a problem with it because it was such a Republican organization.
The CBO does not know what those 14 million people will do. They're suddenly going to be presented with a choice.
Yes, they are. How are they going to have a choice? Insurance companies want to help the poor. They want to help the elderly.
At the moment, they are forced to have insurance. They are forced to. That changes when Obamacare goes away, and those 14 million people now have a choice. Do they want to buy insurance or not?
They have a choice to go to the emergency room, and
they're not
the emergency room is going to be their only place to have insurance. We're going to go back to the time when 50 million people did not have health insurance. Is that what we want again?
I'm surprised at you, Kathy. I'm surprised at you. I'm shocked.
I'm saddened
that you
don't agree with
Jonathan Gruber out fronting for Obamacare and calling everybody stupid, and he's still your guy.
His word choices are poor, but I do believe in the CBO. I do believe in the CBO's numbers.
I believe in the CBO. Kathy Aru, thanks for joining us. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
By the way, we invited Mr. Gruber onto the program. We expect to have him on soon. Yes, we do. North Korea just threatening us, the United States, with merciless attacks as one of our carriers joins South Korean drills. How serious is that? And did Senator Bernie Sanders go too far? He says thousands will die as a result of the Republican health care bill. A reaction from Democrat Senator Jon Tester next. Put Vermont independent senator and former Democrat presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, put him down as a maybe on the GOP's health care bill. A little sarcasm there. Sanders telling reporters thousands will die under the plan. Reaction from Montana Democrat Senator Jon Tester. Senator, do you think he's gone a little far with that one?
Well, let me tell you, people are very concerned. Healthcare is a big part of our economy. I'll just tell you, Stuart, I've been traveling the state since the election in anticipation of the repeal of the health care bill. I heard from a guy that had diabetes that could never get the diabetes under control. He had mental health issues by his own admission and couldn't keep a job. Now that he's got health care, the diabetes is under control. He was able to see a psychologist, get his mental health under control. Another guy my age was sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon having sharpshooters go down his left arm. He told me he would have never went to the doctor if he wouldn't have had health care. So it has its impacts. And I will tell you that in rural America, the impacts are huge on both patients and the healthcare providers.
But the idea that it's going to kill thousands, Are you comfortable going back to your voters, because you're up for re-election next year?
Yeah.
You comfortable going back and saying, those Republicans, that guy Trump, Montana voted for Trump, that they're a bunch of killers? I mean, you comfortable with that?
No. I'm going to be talking about access to affordable health care when I go back to the state, and that is what's really important. And I'll tell you, if these rural hospitals, if their charity care goes up, and this is their words, not mine, they end up being put in a world of hurt and potentially even close. In fact, and that's a big problem in rural America, where there's a long distance between healthcare centers. Understood.
Senator, we went to Health and Human Services. We looked up and we found that in Montana, the Silver Plan under Obamacare, for example, a 44% spike in premiums between 2016 and 2017. And if you go from 2014 to 2018, those premiums were up 83%. Can you vote against any kind of change in Obamacare with those kind of numbers in your state?
Stuart, I've said from the beginning, we need to work to fix Obamacare, keep the parts of it that work and fix the part that isn't. The part you're talking about right there, that is real, and we're seeing folks that don't get any subsidies paying too high a premiums with too high a deductibles. Let's fix that.
How would you fix it?
Well, there's several ways. First of all, more transparency on drug companies, more transparency on insurance companies, and then let's sit down as a body, whether it's in the House or with the Senate, and talk about ways that we can help fix the problem. But to throw everything out, and by the way, take people potentially off of health care, doesn't fix the problem. It takes us back to a problem where there's more charity care, and it puts people who are paying the bills even at more risk.
Would you raise taxes?
Would I raise taxes? No. I think that what's in the health care bill right now is working. And I know that there's folks out there that say it's collapsing, but if you take a look at some of the things that have been done over the last couple months, it may be self-fulfilling prophecy there. The bottom line is that there's 71,000 more Montanans just because of Medicaid expansion that have health care now than that didn't have 15 months ago. That's a good thing. There's people with pre-existing conditions that are able to get it covered. People with high blood pressure be able to go get insurance. Those are good things. The part you talked about the exchanges being too high, absolutely needs to be addressed. But why throw everything out and not really even have any assurances for those people moving forward?
Okay. Very interesting, sir. And John Tester, Democrat, Montana. Thanks for joining us, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Stuart, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. We will be right back. A new budget battle is brewing. Democrats threatening to shut down the government if there's money in a must-pass spending bill next month for the president's border wall. Wasn't it the Democrats who slammed Republicans over a shutdown? Listen to this.
They've made the decision to shut down the government because they want to make it harder, for example, for a woman to get a cancer screening.
They don't believe in government. They're anti-government ideologues who are, it's the Tea Party shutdown of government.
A shutdown will have a very real economic impact on real people right away.
Holding Americans, their livelihoods, their economy, and yes, their security at stake.
We actually work for the American people. They sent us here to get things done, not to play these silly games.
To former FEMA director Michael Brown on what he makes of all of this. First of all, Michael, I have to ask you about the timing. We're snowed in for much of the Northeast, and Democrats are talking about shutting down the government. I think that's bad timing. What say you?
Not only is it bad timing, but having lived in Washington, D.C., Stuart, you know that if there's even a forecast of snow, they'll shut the government down. So I find it absolutely hypocritical that they would talk about this on a day when most of Washington is shut down because of a forecast of snow. I find it absolutely silly.
Let me get this straight. They are threatening to shut down the government because funding for the wall on the southern border is included in a particular bill. Is that what this is all about?
No, well, I think that's what they want to focus on because the wall is a symbol of President Trump's presidency. But what is really going on is The American public has been led to believe that a government shutdown means they won't get a Social Security check, they won't get basic services, and a government shutdown doesn't mean any of that. It means that non-essential personnel won't show up, but the military will continue to do its job, the Department of Homeland Security will continue to do its job, FEMA will continue to do its job. All of these government services that what we call in the vernacular essential government services will continue regardless of whether they call it a government shutdown or not.
In the past, whenever the government was shut down for whatever length of time, it was the Republicans who got the blame. This time around, if the government is shut down again, will it be the Republicans again who get the blame?
Well, with all due respect to the media, I think that's what the media will do, and the Democrats know that. So the Democrats know that they could shut the government down, and instead of the media turning around and saying, isn't that hypocritical? Isn't there a little bit of cognitive dissonance by you now claiming that you're going to shut it down over a political issue? The Democrats are fairly comfortable knowing that the mainstream media will do what they can to shift that blame to the Republicans, and the Democrats will skate.
I want to ask you about this snowstorm that's hit the northeastern United States. Are we now at the point where any disaster of any kind, any event, has to be made good by the government?
We are at that point, and it drives me crazy, Stuart, because what it means is that there's two things that we need to think about. One, snowstorms have always happened. So what's different now? 24/7 news coverage and more people. And with more people, government officials know that they can get votes, they can get accolades, they can get kudos by responding to these disasters. But every time, which they should at the state and local level, but every time we ask the federal government to step in, that weakens state and locals because they know, hey, we can depend upon the federal government, so when it comes to our budget priorities, we can kind of slim back or trim that back because we know that FEMA might step in.
Okay.
I think it's the absolutely wrong direction to go.
I hear you. Michael Brown, former FEMA director. Thanks for joining us, sir. Appreciate it.
You bet, Stuart.
That'll about do it here, but do remember, please, Varney and Company on the Fox Business Network tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, all the way through till noon. That's it from me. For now, The Five is next.